Here we are on a hot summer's evening here in the UK, and what better way to celebrate than to watch a vampire film from the land down under. Unfortunately, I chose to watch The Caretaker, which is a load of rubbish. So let me tell you a little bit about The Caretaker. I will say this, the actual central premise of this film is actually quite good. It almost plays a little bit more like a zombie film than a vampire film, but it is a vampire movie. And basically it's obviously set in Australia, and we're told that there's this vampire outbreak, this kind of vampire virus, which has basically been sort of transmitted through insect bites, specifically mosquitoes. So near enough the whole of the country is infected. We're not quite sure how the rest of the world is sort of faring. It's hinted it might be global, but I don't know how mosquitoes will get across the sea, but whatever. Anyway, so it really sort of takes place in the early sort of stages of this kind of this vampire outbreak, and the story focuses on really kind of four main sort of human characters, as these are the kind of survivors that are kind of after the initial sort of outbreak, so to speak. And we had this kind of this young sort of couple who are having kind of problems. We have this kind of almost a bit like a militant leader of kind of like jilted fathers and things like that. And then we have this sort of really sort of creepy guy who kind of lives out in the wilderness somewhere with his mum. And basically they all end up in this sort of guy's house. But along with them is actually a vampire as well. And they have this kind of uneasy truce with him. And they have this agreement where the humans will look after the vampire while he's asleep during the day and protect him from other humans, and the vampire will do the same in the evening against other vampires. And that's kind of where the Caretaker title comes from. So the idea of it's actually quite original, so I will give it kind of a bit of accolade for that. So it's kind of a different type of vampire film in regards to its central plot than I've seen before. But unfortunately the execution of this film is very poor. Let me start with the acting. The acting is some of the worst that I've seen. It's terrible acting, pretty much from the whole cast. There's a couple of exceptions where the acting is, I guess, passable, but no, pretty much 70% of the cast here are very, very bad acting, and just the line delivery is absolutely horrible. When we first introduce our characters, we get barely no sort of introduction to these sort of their characteristics and kind of who they actually are. We just sort of, the film picks up with these guys almost halfway through doing things, and it just doesn't make sense with the way we introduce these characters. There's no kind of development in them, unfortunately, until we get a little bit of sense of who they are, I guess, as the film progresses. But it takes a really while for us to kind of understand the characters and motivations and things like that. So the pace of this film was all over the place, and it's a very simple plot, to be honest. These people hold up in a house ultimately. There's not really a lot else going on. But, it's just unfortunately the effects as well also don't help. The effects are quite poor. So the vampire is essentially just a guy with contact lenses and fake fangs with some quite sort of poor CGI. He's kind of jumping around, sort of sped up and things like that. So there's not a lot going on apart from the kind of this original idea, which I think is quite good. And like I said, that's the only real thing I would say about it. But everything else of the film is just so poorly executed. It has a kind of a fairly sort of, I guess it thinks it has a twist ending, but it really isn't all that much of a twist, to be quite honest. But there's not a lot to really sort of recommend this one, unfortunately. I mean, I know Australia don't put out a hell of a lot of kind of horror films, really, and unfortunately this one is on the poorer side. It kind of sets up to be, we did the blurb in the back, it actually sounds like it'd be quite good, but it really isn't. It's quite boring. The pacing's well off, the acting's terrible, the effects are kind of mediocre. And that's it really. So 3.5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.